Every year, mountains of used clothes from the West are dumped in developing nations like Pakistan. Some countries also ship off thousands of outdated cars, millions of tons of plastic, even cruise ships past their prime. So how did developing countries become a dumping ground for rich nations? Our first stop is Pakistan, which has become a destination for the West's closet purges. But one company has taken on the mission of transforming old jeans.
We make over 1 billion pairs of jeans every year, and most of them wind up in landfills. That's partially because cotton is notoriously hard to recycle. The process is lengthy and expensive. But some in the fashion industry want to make a greener pair of blue jeans. Artistic Fabric Mills, AFM for short, is one of the first companies in Pakistan to repurpose old cotton into new denim. And that's a big deal, because this country imports more used clothes than anywhere else in the world. So, how do you recycle jeans? It starts at massive facilities like this one in Karachi, where workers sort 25 metric tons of used clothes every day. Most of these items were donated to charities like the Salvation Army in other countries. Oftentimes, whatever can't be sold in American and European thrift stores can be sold to grading centers in Pakistan. Purses, sweaters, pants, and more get separated into hundreds of categories. Items are bundled based on quality and type. Then they're shipped to places like this huge second-hand market in Ghana. Here, local vendors bid on bales, then try to sell their wares for a profit. Back in Pakistan, the lowest grade garments are sold for cheap to recyclers, typically to be shredded and used in things like insulation. And where most see rags, AFM sees riches. It buys used jeans from this local grading company.
Clothes which are like too dirty or not good for wearing, we give it to like the companies like Artistic for recycling.
At AFM, workers cut down the garments. The company can't process stretch jeans mixed with polyester or nylon, so it only accepts denim that is at least 98% cotton. It takes around 3 pairs of used jeans to make 1 pair of recycled pants. A quick pass through this conveyor belt cuts these long strips of fabric into small pieces. Each step aims to grind the pants back into cotton. This compactor presses the cotton into large bales. The company says these machines can process up to 800 metric tons of used clothes every month. But the recycled fibers are too short to be spun into yarn, so the company has to add virgin cotton into the mix. When AFM first bought a cotton recycling plant in 2015, it could only incorporate 5% recycled material into its blend. Nowadays, it can mix in as much as 30% used cotton. This machine, called a blendomat, skims off the top layer of fiber from multiple bales to ensure consistency. This particular batch of denim will use 8% recycled material and 92% virgin cotton. In the spinning room, a carding machine draws the blended cotton into a web, then stretches it into thick ropes called slivers. The ring spinning process turns rope into yarn. Though largely automated now, this method is based on ancient yarn spinning techniques. The fiber is twisted tightly and then wrapped around a spool called a bobbin. Workers place larger spools on a metal rack called a creel. Then they wind the threads around a beam. One of these can hold over 4,000 strands of yarn side by side. Now it's time for a bath. AFM dyes its fabric with recycled indigo, eliminating wastewater from the dyeing process entirely.
We are making this fabric by extracting the indigo from our dyed textile waste and then reusing it to dye a new fabric.
The strips appear green at first because indigo dye is not water soluble. The threads will only turn blue when they come into contact with oxygen. That's why the ropes are brought high up into the air. The process is called skying. These rollers press out the excess water, then each rope lands in its own bucket. In the rope dyeing department, production is around 70,000 meters per day. Typically, the indigo dyeing process is associated with massive water consumption and pollution. Although laws prohibit it, some Pakistani factories pump untreated water into sewers, city canals, rivers, and groundwater, contaminating already scarce supplies.
सेम की वजह से अक्सर बच्चों में बीमारियां, बड़ों में सांस की बीमारियां और अक्सर औकात बच्चे जो होते हैं ना वो नाले में गिर जाते हैं, लोगों को नुकसान होता है.
Many factories lack the space or resources to treat their water. But AFM says it purifies around 300,000 gallons of wastewater in a giant treatment plant every day. Up to 70% of this water is used in its recycling process. Back at the factory, an automated loom mixes dyed thread with white thread, typically in a ratio of 3:1. This gives jeans their signature twill pattern. The fabric wraps around giant wheels, then gets layered into sheets. In total, AFM produces 36 million meters of fabric a year. That's nearly enough to circle the entire planet. The finished cloth gets cut into various sizes and styles. Using cutting-edge software, lasers etch patterns into the jeans. This technology eliminates the need for toxic chemicals, often used to create a stressed, vintage look. AFM uses less water in its finishing process as a result. Saving water is crucial in Pakistan. Much of the country relies on the Indus River for irrigation and hydropower. But extreme droughts mean parts of it are already drying up. It takes 10,000 liters of water to make a single pair of jeans. So cutting back on water consumption can have a huge impact. Eco-friendly washers give the jeans a more distressed look.
The sustainable wash means less energy, less water, less chemical. This is the big impact for the sustainability factor, what we are doing right now.
Then, a blower dries the jeans while they hang in the air. Think of it like a car wash for pants. Workers add the finishing touches from buttons to labels. From there, they're off to stores across Europe, North America, and Australia. Once used jeans get a second shelf life. While it may look like AFM has its process down to a science, it wasn't always that way. The now multi-million-dollar company started as a small garment shop in 1949. Ahmed Omer and his wife Hadra Ahmed sold handmade leather hats and bags to sailors out of their home. In 1972, they opened their first garment factory. Today, it's run by their son, Iqbal Ahmed. Hadra's role in the company would later inspire her granddaughters, Farah and Haya Iqbal, to follow in her footsteps. The two sisters are now directors for AFM.
My grandmother would actually manage the operations at that time. And then it grew into factories. When women apply to AFM for jobs, not just on a worker level, but for management roles, they do it because they know that it's a possibility here.
AFM has also been ahead of the curve when it comes to manufacturing sustainable denim. In 2015, it became one of the first companies in Pakistan to own this, a cotton recycling plant. From there, producing recycled denim became priority number one. AFM isn't alone in its mission to recycle textiles. Other factories in Pakistan are investing in cotton recycling as well.
It's become a real need, and it's not just something that looks good on your portfolio, but it's something that is now required.
Even big-name companies like H&M have invested millions in new recycling technology. At the company's store in Stockholm, customers pay to have old clothes transformed into new ones. but recycling a single garment can take multiple days. H&M wants to move to 100% recycled or sustainably sourced materials by 2030, but scaling up recycled production is expensive. AFM has a decades-long head start. The cost of its factories, though massive, were spread out over many years.
At the time, nobody was doing it. No customers even understood why it was a necessity. But it was my father's vision that he stuck his ground and he made this massive investment because he could tell where the world was heading.
AFM says it has the capacity to create 500,000 pairs of jeans every month, but its actual production is around 300,000. For recycled jeans to become a large-scale success, more companies need to get involved. Right now, less than 1% of all clothes are turned into recycled garments. An even simpler solution is to buy less.
I firmly believe that consuming less but of better quality is the way forward. And that's because this is not to discourage people from buying more, but if they buy better and they buy better quality, once somebody is done with the garments, that can always be resold secondhand or donated. It just increases the life of a garment if you buy better quality.
From Pakistan, we travel to the US, where fast fashion has taken over closets, and clothes, once out of style, are getting thrown out faster than ever. Here's how online retailer ThredUp is trying to cut down the waste.
Around the world, a garbage truck's worth of clothing is dumped or burned every second. Demand for used clothing is growing. Platforms like ThredUp hope new tech will help keep more of it in closets and out of landfills. So how does this massive warehouse work? And where does unsold clothing actually end up? Anyone can ship used clothing to ThredUp. The company started out as a peer-to-peer business like Poshmark or eBay. But in 2011, it pivoted to handle the entire selling process, from listing to shipping.
From Gap to Gucci, we really are willing to accept, process, list, and sell all of it.
Clothes arrive at the warehouse in what ThredUp calls clean-out kits.
It's about the size of a laundry bag. They basically put all of the clothing that they're not wearing anymore in that bag and send it to one of our distribution centers.
After opening up the clean-out kits, Erica Anderson's team weeds out anything dirty or ripped.
Anything that's gross, to be honest. We love to check hot spots, under the arms, crotches, all of that.
Once an item passes inspection, the labels are tagged into ThredUp's network with help from AI. Dan DeMeyer oversees this process.
There's a lot that AI can automate in terms of detecting color pigments, determining what a category is. We now even have the ability to automate measurement collection, which is something that's new for us towards the end of last year.
The company also uses an algorithm that prices items based on size, quality, and demand.
We have this learning system where this algorithm gets smarter and smarter as we scale, as we process and sell more items to get better and better at the listing price.
Next, everything gets tagged with a QR code. Then the garment takes a ride on a 100,000 square foot hanger system, which runs through the whole facility. ThredUp launched it in 2018, and it helped pull items 5 times faster. The next stop on the line is the photography department.
This is also another automated station. The item rotates and there's cameras that are mounted all around it, taking photos. So not only do we have the front, the back, and the side, but we actually have 360 photography.
Most items will spend 1 to 2 months in this warehouse before they're sold.
When you see these carousels behind me spin, what they're doing is bringing items forward that customers have purchased, so our operators can then go through the carousel and find that item with speed and ease.
Workers bring the purchased items down to pack stations and fold them up for shipping. The original owners get a cut of that sale. That can range from a few dollars to several hundred, depending on the brand.
Our top selling brands are Lululemon, Madewell, J. Crew, and Taylor Loft. The higher the listing price, the higher the percentage.
ThredUp has a team of authenticators who verify luxury products from brands like Gucci, Hermes, and Givenchy. For now, it only sells used clothing for women and children.
One of the challenges with men is they buy a lot less clothing, and when they buy it, they wear it for years and years and years. But in terms of being able to sell it online, it's a little fewer and far between what items would actually be in good enough shape to resell.
In 2024, ThredUp introduced a suite of AI shopping tools, like this virtual stylist called Style Chat. If you type in retro-style prints, you'll get outfit recommendations based on what's in stock.
It's basically like a natural language back and forth conversation you can have with ThredUp about what you're looking for.
ThredUp also released an AI image search, where you can upload photos and have the AI look for similar items across the site. The company says people using this tool are 85% more likely to buy something because of the more tailored experience. It's estimated that over half of US consumers will use AI to shop online this year. But what happens to the items that ThredUp can't sell? The company told us it doesn't directly dispose of any clothing. Instead, it passes it along to aftermarket partners. That's where resellers like Stephen Bethel come in. He founded Bank & Vogue in the early 90s to buy pre-owned clothes from thrift stores and charities that couldn't sell them.
We just go around and pick up the beer cans at the end of the party. So the first thing is, we're not going to call it waste. There's no such thing as waste in this world.
He helps find international buyers for the estimated 780,000 metric tons of used clothing the US and Canada export every year.
A typical thrift operator sells about 25% of what is donated. So 75% of it, they need to find a home for.
Typically, leftovers from places like Goodwill get squished into bales and end up in places like Gujarat, India, where Stephen operates a sorting and recycling hub.
We're taking existing garments that can't be resold and we're turning them into new and relevant items. We try to find the best value in the world for the clothing.
Pakistan is one of the world's largest importers of used garments. The country has special economic zones dedicated to resorting these goods. Workers here sort 25 metric tons of used clothes every day into hundreds of categories. From tops and casual jeans to children's clothes and fitness gear, everything is sorted into its own category. Much of this is sold domestically in Pakistan, but the main job here is preparing garments for re-export.
In those sorting houses, there's a triage that happens. And then there are specific containers made based on quality, based on condition, that are then resold to relevant markets. And it's really important because there are some markets, for example, in Central America where they really like strappy dresses, but you can't sell strappy dresses in Jordan.
Repackaged bales are often sent to places with low import taxes and large secondhand markets, like Accra, Ghana. When we filmed there in 2022, it was home to one of the largest secondhand markets in Africa. Shipping containers filled with millions of garments arrived at Kantomato Market every week. And this place employed thousands of people.
You see the way I'm squeezing my face? The fire burns me.
Vendors would bid on bales sight unseen, usually paying a few $100s. Then they tried to turn a profit by selling what they found in the market. But vendors only sold about 60% of the goods that flowed through Kantomato Market. The rest ended up in dumps or washed out to sea. Liz Ricketts runs a nonprofit called the Ore Foundation, which supports people working in this market.
So what we believe is that what you're seeing is a sliver of what is actually lying on the ocean floor.
Most of the clothes we wear today are made from synthetic fibers like polyester. In the environment, they break down into microplastics, and they're extremely flammable. In January 2025, much of the Kantomato Market burned to the ground, killing 2 people and impacting the livelihoods of 10,000 workers. Most of the market has now been rebuilt. Thousands of miles away in Chile, a special free trade zone allows merchants to import tons of used clothing without paying the usual taxes and fees. The country is the largest importer of used clothing in Latin America. About 130,000 tons of it arrive here every year. But the country imports more clothing than it can handle. So much comes from the United States that here used clothing is often referred to as ropa americana, American clothing. Most of these garments are poor quality and hard to sell. So local vendors have been dumping unsold clothing in the Atacama Desert for over 20 years. It's illegal, but authorities don't have enough resources to stop it. This pile in the Atacama Desert was once so big it could be seen from space. In June 2022, it caught fire and burned for 2 weeks. In recent years, there have been some technological innovations to handle clothing waste, like textile-to-textile recycling, a process where used clothing can be transformed back into raw fibers and spun into new yarn. But collecting, sorting, and processing old clothes is complicated and difficult to scale. Today, less than 1% of old clothes are recycled into new garments. Shay Sethi founded his company AmberCycle in 2015 and developed a new chemical process for separating polyester from dyes and other fabrics and turning it into new material.
The idea for AmberCycle is really just, how do you take an old t-shirt and turn it into a new t-shirt instead of using natural resources?
In 2020, a research institute in Hong Kong started experimenting with textile-to-textile recycling. It partnered with H&M to make this machine, which turns used clothes into new ones in about 3 days. But recycling a single garment this way still requires some virgin material. In Pakistan, one family-owned company took the idea of recycling clothes to a factory scale. Artistic Fabric Mills is one of the first companies in Pakistan to repurpose old cotton into new denim. But sales of cheaply made clothes continue to outpace efforts to deal with the waste they create. ThredUp is trying to do its part as well. The company accepts fast fashion items to save them from landfills, but unlike other garments, the original owners don't get a cut of the sale.
And that is a nod to sort of not incentivizing them to keep shopping fast fashion.
The government is putting pressure on brands too. The US is closing a tax loophole that allowed brands like Shein and Temu to import ultra-cheap clothes duty-free. Countries including France have passed extended producer responsibility laws, or EPRs, which force clothing companies to fund recycling programs for the waste they create. Since it passed the law in 2008, France has seen a threefold increase in the collection and recycling of used textiles. But in the US, California is the only state with a textile EPR law on the books.
We are only going to get the brands to change the way in which they make clothes by legislating that there needs to be recycled content. Because we've seen over the last 30, 40 years that just letting people do what they want to do, letting companies do what they want to do, they answer to their shareholders first before they answer to the environment. And that's wrong.
Our next stop is Turkey, where EU countries are shipping off their trash. This recycling facility is turning plastic bottles into fabric. It's one of the ways Turkey is dealing with a massive trash problem. Packaging materials, old toys, and industrial waste, mainly from the UK and European Union, are piling up in illegal dumps across the country. The region started sending more garbage to Turkey in 2018 after China closed its doors to imported waste. By 2019, Turkey was taking in more than a quarter of the EU's used plastics. Some of it gets recycled at facilities like this one in Gaziantep.
Yaklaşık 3000 ton plastik atığını, özellikle PET atıkları biz hatta bunun daha da fazlasını tekrardan doğadan alıp tekrardan kullanılabilir, insanların kullanabileceği niteliğe dönüştürüyoruz.
First, the trash is sorted through machines. Then workers look through it once more to separate the usable plastic. It's cleaned and broken down into smaller pieces. The flakes are melted and sent through a series of machines that transform them into threads. The end product is used in clothing brands around the world, including H&M and Zara. The company's innovation has been hailed as an economic and environmental success. But critics say much of the plastic waste that comes into Turkey is never processed. Instead, it ends up in piles like this. The labels on these items leave little doubt of where they originally came from.
Bir kere Avrupa vatandaşlarının şunu bilmesi gerekiyor. Temiz sokaklar Almanya'da, İngiltere'de, Fransa'da toplanıp ayrıştırılan, onların özenerek ayrıştırdıkları, farklı kutulara attıkları çöplerin son durağı geri dönüşüm tesisleri olmuyor.
The Turkish government banned polyethylene plastic imports in May of 2021 following reports of toxic chemicals in and around processing plants. It's the most commonly used plastic that creates packaging. But just 2 months later, the ban was reversed, and now Turkey is once again a destination for trash.
Durumdan bahsetmiyoruz. Gümrük kapısına gelen binlerce konteyneri açıp tek tek içerisinde ne var, acaba kirli mi değil mi kontrolü yapmak çok mümkün değil.
Activists have called on Turkey to stop accepting plastic waste, but so far the economics have proved too appealing. In 2024, Turkey's plastics imports were valued at more than $15 billion. Our recycling journey takes us back to Pakistan, which is also a dumping ground for the world's largest cruise ships, which demand a specialized disposal. Here's how workers process the massive vessels.
This is where some of the largest ships in the world come to die. The Gadani Yard in Pakistan. But the place is also a death trap for the hundreds of men who work to break down these rusted giants for as little as $4 a day.
तो मजबूरी की वजह से करना पड़ता है ना, जितना भी खतरनाक हो तो करना पड़ता है.
Some of these vessels are here illegally, like the cruise ship Antares Experience, which came from Greece. International laws ban many foreign countries from dumping their toxic old ships on the beaches of developing countries for environmental reasons. Still, loopholes allow these giants to come here from China, the Middle East, and Europe through indirect routes.
Shipping companies deliberately lie to authorities. They do not disclose that their true intention is to scrap these ships in the worst possible yards located on the beaches of South Asia.
Meanwhile, most workers here come from far-off villages and have never even seen the ocean or a ship before. So why are these vessels ending up on the shores of Pakistan? And who is responsible for the safety of these underpaid workers propping up a billion-dollar recycling industry? This 85,000-ton Greek carrier supplied coal around the world. But after sailing for 21 years, the Enterprise Majuro is falling apart. At 150 feet tall and 900 feet long, this beast will take a fleet of 200 workers about 3 months to fillet for its parts. Many of them live right on the yard, like Azam Khan, who moved here from northern Pakistan.
देखो ये जीन और बलाओं का घर है, समंदर का किनारा है, तो न बाजार है इधर, न कोई रोशनी है, न कोई कुछ भी है.
These huts belong to the boss of this ship lot, and the men live here rent-free as long as they work 6 days a week and don't go outside past 8 p.m. No one here has clean running water, and they all share a communal bathroom.
जानवरों का जिंदगी है, सेहत का ख्याल इधर नहीं रखा जाते. हमारा छोटी उम्र का तस्वीर आप देख ले, परेशान हो जाएगा.
Azam bandages his shoes for extra protection.
ये हम काम करता था, पैर के ऊपर लोहा गिरा, उससे चोट लगा, काफ़ी सा चोट लगा. मैंने कहा तो सर टांग नहीं है, चेकअप किया, हड्डी बचा हुआ था, गोश्त काटा था.
Azam's main job is to break up smaller parts once they've been separated from the rods that hold the body of the ship.
इधर काम करते हुए मैंने जख्मी बंदे को भी देखा, मरते हुए भी देखा. इस इलाके में नहीं, पूरा पाकिस्तान में और काम नहीं है ना. दूसरा जगह में कोई काम होता तो कोई पागल इधर आता.
Gadani gets mostly cargo carriers, oil tankers, and cruise liners. Like this 1994 Carnival Fascination, which sailed around the Caribbean to Miami until its features became outdated. The ship was sold to a Chinese cruise company, which soon decided to sell it for scrap. To break down vessels here, workers use what's called the gravity method. They mostly let the parts fall on their own. But that's how accidents can happen, says Muhammad Ashraf, who has worked here for half his life.
मुझे पता है ये चीज़ मेरे ऊपर आएगी या खतरनाक है जब मौत आनी है रोड पे भी जा रहे तो वो तो आनी है
Tractors drag the larger parts to shore, where workers break them down. Ashraf has to take apart this entire chamber. Most ships don't make it past the age of 30. Their insides begin to rust. Many contain poisonous chemicals like asbestos, residual oil, and toxic paint. And breathing the dust can cause permanent lung damage or death. Nearly 2,000 people have been severely injured or killed on this beach since the late 1960s. But that number is likely much higher. Many workers disappear or drown under falling parts, and their deaths often don't get tracked.
An international law enacted in 1992 technically requires countries to document all toxic waste before sending their ships abroad. But experts say this is often ignored.
A lot of vessels that are reaching the shores of South Asia for breaking receive import clearance based on fake documents. These documents declare that the vessels are toxic free. Workers, when they will take these vessels apart, they will face risks they are completely unaware of.
Shipbreaking became a big business in Pakistan in the 1980s, after Europe began regulating ship waste pollution on its own shores. That's when many developed nations started sending their vessels off to countries with lax environmental regulations and cheap labor. The industry grew across South Asia, with yards expanding rapidly in Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. In the late 80s and 90s, reports of accidents, poor work conditions, and child labor started to come out, triggering a wave of international laws that tried to regulate the business. Nowadays, developed countries aren't technically allowed to send their ships to places that don't have the same environmental standards and labor laws. But it happens anyway. Like with the Antares experience, which came from Greece illegally. We reached out to the ship's most recent recorded owners and operators, but did not get a response. But the most common paths are legal loopholes. For example, a European shipping company could get away with sending its vessel for scrapping to Pakistan if it first sends it to another country that's allowed to export it there. Another way to get around the law is by registering a ship under countries with lax regulations known as flags of convenience. Like the Enterprise, which was owned by a Greek company but registered under the Marshall Islands, a country known for its low taxes. Reports of the ships beached in Gadani in 2023 and 2024 show that most were registered under other flags of convenience, like Comoros, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Panama, but were usually owned by companies in China, the Middle East, and Greece.
मैं तो बोलता हूँ कि अगर जहाज भेजें माशाल्लाह हम गरीब आदमी मजदूरी करें इधर और अपना रोजी कमाएं अपने घरों में जाएं
44-year-old Javed Iqbal sorts the parts Ashraf cuts up. But like most here, he doesn't have a license to handle this crane.
He says no one's ever asked for it.
तो यार कोई अगर यार दोस्त है किसी के ऊपर गिर गया मार गया बहुत हालात खराब हो जाते हैं इंसान के.
Javed moved here 25 years ago. He sees his wife and 3 children once a year if he can afford time off.
घर वालों को पता ही नहीं है इधर के ये काम क्या करते हैं क्या नहीं खाली वो तनख्वाह देते हैं जाके उनको बस वो गांव के लोग हैं उनको क्या पता है जहाज इधर क्या चीज़ है ये क्रेन क्या चीज़ है.
Crane operators like Javed are among the best paid on the lot. But many workers here usually make about $4 a day, less than the $6 minimum wage in Pakistan, which buys 2 gallons of milk there. Despite attempts to regulate the business, cheap labor and pollution are still a problem in yards across South Asia. But the Ali Aga yard in Turkey says it's different, and that it's developed a recycling infrastructure designed to handle toxic waste. That's partly why it's become one of the most popular destinations for Europe's old ships. But reports show that Ali Aga is heavily polluted with toxic substances. Now there's a new law, the Hong Kong Convention, which is set to take effect in June 2025.
On paper, it aims to make more parties, from the ship's owner to its flag state to the country that recycles it, responsible for safely disposing of it. The agreement requires every arriving ship to have an inventory of its hazardous waste and a clear plan for how to handle it. Before accepting a vessel, each yard needs to submit a recycling plan to its government and provide proof that they can do this without contaminating the environment or compromising workers' safety.
India, Bangladesh, and Turkey have all signed the treaty and have begun updating their yards.
Pakistan was the last major shipbreaking country to sign the convention, and it's done little to modernize its practices.
Pakistan is one of the worst destinations for end-of-life vessels.
And experts say the new law may not change much.
It was crafted by the shipping industry itself, and it's like putting the fox in charge of managing the chickens. If the convention will not be enforced properly and interpreted in a strict way, it will simply rubber stamp current substandard practices. It will greenwash the whole sector. What today is illegal and unethical will suddenly become legal and okay.
And people who have worked here their whole lives worry about that too.
शुरू से जब से हम आया तकरीबन हमारा 27-28 साल हो गया 30 साल हो गया वही का वही है इसमें मैंने कोई ऐसा ही तब्दीली नहीं देखा मुस्तकबिल यहाँ का ये ऐसे ही चलेगा जब पाकिस्तान ऐसी तरह होता है तो ये ऐसे ही चलेंगे
Azam had other family members who worked here too.
But in 2016, an old oil tanker exploded while it was getting broken down. The blast claimed the lives of at least 29 men.
Azam's relatives were among them. The explosion left another 60 people severely burned or disabled for life.
Workers we spoke with said since the incident, their employers have first aid and ambulances on standby. The closest hospital is about 6 miles away, but it isn't equipped to handle serious cases.
The badly injured have to travel 1 hour to Karachi.
We couldn't reach the manager of the lot Azam Khan works on, but we spoke with the chairman of the Pakistan Shipbreakers Association. He also runs a ship lot here.
2017 में जो अफसोसनाक वाक़या हुआ उसमें तकरीबन 21 आदमी मरे और हमने पर जो लेबर है उसको तकरीबन 20 से 21 लाख रुपया कंपनसेशन का दिया.
That's about $750 paid to the family of a worker who died on the job.
But activists say that families are often not notified since many workers don't have proof of employment.
Farooqi says that's not true.
रजिस्टर्ड तो हमारे पास भी रजिस्टर्ड होते हैं बाकायदा तौर पर उनका आईडी जो है वो हम इसका नाम के अपने पास रखते हैं और उसको पुलिस स्टेशन में उसको रजिस्टर्ड भी कराते हैं उसकी जो फॉर्मेलिटीज़ हैं, जो गवर्नमेंट की लेबर लॉज हैं और दूसरे लॉज हैं, उसको बाकायदा तौर पर यहाँ पर हम पूरा उसको वो करते हैं।
Gadani is divided into 132 lots. Some are owned by private landowners and others by the government, which leases the lots to private companies.
But these days, many are vacant because getting a ship to Pakistan has gotten so expensive.
For example, the folks who bought the Enterprise Majuro from its Greek owners paid about $10 million for it. Then they had to pay a 17% customs tax to the Pakistani government, and another 17% tax on all the parts of the ship that were resellable. There's also a 1% regional tax in Gadani. All this adds up to roughly $13.5 million. It's unclear if lot owners actually pay all the taxes. Many have been accused of exploiting government connections to skirt regulations. But shipyard owners say getting these vessels here ultimately helps the workers too.
जब ये जहाज नहीं होते तो ये बेचारे सारे बेरोजगार हो जाते हैं और इनके पास कोई रोजगार का कोई मुताबिल कोई वो भी नहीं है.
Once a ship is broken apart, workers salvage everything from desks and cabinets, which can be resold as wood scraps, down to the screws and cables that once held all the ship's parts together.
तो इसमें 1000 किस्म का माल होता है, उसका मुख्तलिफ रेट होती है. जैसा का मतलब घर में बर्तन है तो उसका अलग रेट है, रज़ाई बिस्तरे का अलग रेट है, दरवाजे का अलग रेट है.
In fact, up to 95% of a ship's remains can return a profit.
A ship's steel hull is among the most prized of its parts.
The manager of this ship lot can resell it to metal mills for millions of dollars. The Gadani shipyard salvages about 1.5 million tons of steel a year, accounting for 20% of all the steel Pakistan uses. It takes about 400 trucks to move just one ship's remains to their next destination.
This truck is off to a factory in Lahore.
फिर हम खाली करते हैं, ये चादर जो है ये मजदूर नहीं उठा सकते, तो ये हम पैक कर लेते हैं मजदूरों के साथ, वो छोटा छोटा कर लेते हैं.
Then they sort the scrap into piles depending on the shape and type of metal. Workers cut the ship walls into rectangles to fit this slicing machine.
कोई मिल वाला जो है वो स्पेशल सरिया बना देते हैं, वो जो है उसे नट काबले वगैरह.
This crew got here at 4:30 a.m. and they won't finish until 8 p.m. 16-hour shifts are standard here. These links were once part of a chain used to anchor a ship. Workers have to heat this to over 1800 degrees Fahrenheit to make the links easier to reshape. That process emits toxic vapors,
which could permanently scar a worker's lungs.
At this factory, they usually repurpose about 10 to 15 tons of scrap a day, which helps reduce the nation's demand for mining new steel. Most of the repurposed metal ends up at construction sites across Pakistan where it's used to build bridges, roads, and buildings. Every year, about 1,000 ships need to find their final resting place, where they'll get scrapped and recycled.
Azam isn't sure how many more he'll break down within his lifetime.
But he says he knows that one day this beach will become his graveyard too.
मुस्तकबिल ये है कि बस मौत तक ये काम करते हैं, अगर अल्लाह ने चाहा तो यहाँ से नसीब बदल हो सकती है. दिन तो ऐसी गुजरती है कि बच्चों माँ बाप से दूर, महीना नहीं है, 2 नहीं है, 4 नहीं है, साल नहीं है, 2 साल नहीं है, 3 साल नहीं है ना, ज़िंदगी सारा यहाँ गुजरती है तो लाजमी बात है आदमी को अफसोस और दुख होता है.
From the world's bulkiest junk to the smallest, discarded items are a lifeline for many developing nations. Here's how teens in India recycle old electronics that can contain poisonous metals.
India has become the world's biggest dumping ground for electronic waste. And much of it is processed and recycled manually, often by teenagers.
ऐसे खोलते हैं ना इसको तो ये लग जाता है और ये पत्ता जो है इसका ये सब लग जाता है हाथों में कभी कदार.
E-waste is full of toxic chemicals like lead, arsenic, and mercury. But there are also plenty of valuable materials like copper, platinum, and even gold. So why does so much of it end up in landfills? And why is recycling it such a risky business? 14-year-old Gulzar starts his morning selling breakfast at his father's food cart. And after school, he heads to this dump to sort through e-waste.
इस काम में थोड़ा बहुत तो रिस्क है लेकिन करना पड़ता है मजबूरी में.
Most of India's electronic waste ends up in northeast Delhi's Seelampur neighborhood. Nearly 50,000 people dig through the trash here every day. Many of them are teenagers, all searching for old cell phones, computers, and video game controllers. Gulzar's hands are so damaged from years of prying them apart that his fingerprints have worn away.
जब मैंने पत्ता तोड़ना स्टार्ट करा था तब हाथ कटने लगे थे ना यहाँ पे तो मोबाइल जब फिंगरप्रिंट लगाता था चलता नहीं था मोबाइल खुलता नहीं था जल्दी.
Few have gloves or other safety equipment. The health risks are one of the reasons why Gulzar hasn't told his mother he still works here.
मम्मी कहती है काम मत करो पढ़ाई कर लो और नौकरी मिल जाएगी तुम्हें बढ़िया वाली.
Most of his friends also scavenge for a living, like Aleem, who stopped going to school because his father got tuberculosis 3 years ago. That's why his family sent him to work, even though he was just 16. Now, Aleem breaks down up to 150 of these phones every day.
ये होता है एक पत्ता मोबाइल का पत्ता जो इससे ऐसे अलग करना पड़ता है. ये होती बॉडी ये होता पत्ता.
Old electronics have high levels of mercury, cadmium, and lead, which can harm the kidneys. But they also hold precious metals. Usually, Aleem can collect up to 11 pounds of mixed scrap, which he sells for $6 a day to a middleman at Ghaffar Market. It's famous for cheap electronics, and many e-waste devices are refurbished and sold here. Processing e-waste is complicated and expensive, even in facilities that have more structure and modern machinery.
They're not designed to be recycled. Many different chemical compounds all smashed together. When devices got smaller and smaller, removing whole components became less and less possible.
We visited one of the largest recyclers in the US back in 2021. At the time, Sims Lifecycle Services was processing up to 6 million pounds of electronics a month. Most of these old devices come from private companies like HP that ship it here. A chunk of the work is done by hand. Memory units, processors, screens, keyboards, and motherboards can all be reused. Workers clean them, check if they're working, and send them back into inventory to be sold again.
Sometimes when you can't sell a whole laptop, we can remove parts from it and either rebuild a laptop to sell or sell the parts.
Big hard drives pulled from computers or servers are another moneymaker. Any stored data has to be wiped before a drive can be resold.
We have a lot of banks and insurance companies as our clients, so you can well imagine that those folks want their data erased properly.
What couldn't be refurbished used to be sent to recycling. Workers would remove hazardous materials like batteries before sending the device to a shredder. Metals, circuit boards, and plastic were separated in that process and resold. But since we filmed with them, recycling has become their last resort, only to prevent materials from going to landfills. They're more focused on refurbishing devices to extend their lifespan. China, the US, and India are the biggest generators of e-waste. But only 17% of electronics discarded globally were recycled in 2019. Much of it is illegally shipped to developing countries, where it's sorted by informal workers. But they don't have the knowledge or the tools to safely handle it. So a lot of it ends up in landfills. Sustainability expert Panni Verma says that's contaminating the environment.
Air, water, soil, all three of them are getting badly affected.
Sometimes they burn the waste that they cannot resell.
This is going into the nostrils. It's leading to stunted growth in children. It's leading to miscarriages in women. It's leading to organ damage. It's leading to bone density loss.
And most electronics are coated in flame retardants that release poisonous gases when burned.
It's also affecting the human body. Skin diseases, different types of cancers, they are happening because of the contaminations.
The waste has also polluted water sources like the nearby Yamuna River.
They acid wash the motherboards to take out the metals, the precious metals, and then they just drain it into any kind of a water body.
With global e-waste expected to increase 38% by the end of the decade, India implemented new rules to regulate recycling facilities. But they don't impact informal workers. Nor do they address child labor in the industry. Children as young as 14 are allowed to work in India, but not in hazardous conditions like these.
It kind of has become a work of generations, one generation to next, to next, to next. There has to be talks of these young children working to go study.
But going to school is not an option for Aleem. His mother, Gulshan Bano, sells vegetables to get by.
जो मैं कमाती हूँ वो किराया चला जाता है जो लड़का कमाता घर में खर्चा उठ जाता है वो भी कभी पूरा होता कभी नहीं होता
Aleem's friend Gulzar still goes to school.
पढ़ने में साइंस की किताब बहुत बढ़िया लगती है.
And he has dreams of a better life.
बड़े हो करके बन जाऊंगा पुलिस ऑफिसर ही.
Our last stop is Indonesia, where plastic trash from the West is ending up in food, waterways, and landfills.
There are about 60 factories churning out tofu here in Troporo village. Dakim has worked at many of them since he was 16. He lives at the factory, like many workers here, because he came from a village almost 200 miles away just for this work.
Kadang seminggu, kadang lebih. Udah bertahun-tahun di tahu ya, jadi udah terbiasa lah.
They start by washing soybeans, the base of tofu. Many factories get them straight from Argentina or the US for about 27 cents a pound. The imported variety is actually cheaper. The beans are also bigger and richer in protein. Workers soak them overnight to soften them up, and then grind them into a paste. These men get paid just over $2 a day. That was Takim's only job for 2 whole years. Becoming one of the cooks is a rite of passage. They get paid over $12 a day if they work fast. In this part of Indonesia, that's $1 above the minimum wage, which can be hard to come by here. Next, they pump the soybean paste into one of these concrete basins. These are heated by furnaces that use plastic trash as fuel.
Ayo, andai kata tidak ada tahu, Pak. Plastik hidupnya seperti apa? Coba dibayangkan.
Muhammad Gufron, who runs this factory, pays $9 for a truckload from a nearby dump.
Maru gratis. Tidak beli loh, berhubung lama. Sudah laku.
That plastic lasts him about a day, but it's still much cheaper than wood, which costs more than twice as much. And they would need a lot of it, because this paste has to get really hot before it separates into pulp and this soybean water. Workers drain the mixture into this cheesecloth and swirl it around to remove as much water as possible.
Nyaringnya itu kan panas itu pas nyaring.
Workers get covered in this liquid as it sprays everywhere.
Ya biasa kalau gatal-gatal gitu, kena kutu air kan dari pagi kerendam air terus.
Many develop a skin fungus that forms painful blisters.
Kalau butuh uang pasti kerja.
Dan rata-rata milih kerja atau enggak?
Kebanyakan milih kerja. Kalau sakit milih kerja.
Ya karena penghasilannya kan lebih tinggi. Ya paling beda 40% gitu sama penghasilan tani. Alhamdulillah cukup.
People who work here are also breathing in toxic fumes all day long.
We are going to measure the air pollution.
Daru Setiorini works for Ekoton, a local environmental group that tracks pollution in the area.
The standard is 150 microgram.
But this reads 1,500. That means there are 10 times more particles, like microplastics and other toxic chemicals, floating in the air than the safe limit set by the World Health Organization and by the Indonesian government. As part of Ekoton's research, Daru tests these surfaces too. She sets out a petri dish, usually for about 8 hours, to capture falling particles. This time, she left it here for just 30 minutes, and then took it back to the lab for testing.
Ini juga salah satu jenis mikroplastik yang bentuknya itu fiber ya. Ini ada juga film, jenis mikroplastik juga. Nah ini dia terlihat tertempel ya, ditempelin oleh bakteri-bakteri, patogen, virus maupun polutan yang ada di sekitarnya.
Those microplastics and the contaminants they attract all end up in this tofu.
So when people eat tofu, the microplastic will be bad impact to our hormone system, digestive system, and our reproductive system as well. It can cause infertility in the male.
Despite the risks, tofu production hasn't stopped. Once the men have strained the pulp, they add fermented coconut water to the leftover soybean liquid. Within minutes, the mixture congeals into curds. Workers scoop those out and transfer them to these molds.
Bau sebelah kanan sini yang paling pegel. Kan begini terus sih, Pak.
The men don't use any measuring tools. They have to eyeball how much they scoop in.
Nyetak gitu, waktu nyetak gitu kan namanya feeling orang kan nggak tentu bener. Ya kadang ketipisan gitu.
If it does, Takim has to redo the batch. And he doesn't get paid for what he throws out. The tofu curds are pressed between layers of cheesecloth. Stacking the crates squeezes out excess water. forming these solid blocks of tofu. Women take over for the next step. They use rusty grill grates to cut the chunks of tofu into even rectangles. And then they package it. The Indonesian government hasn't managed to stop the practice of cooking tofu in toxic environments. The country banned burning plastic outside in 2008, but tofu factories do it in furnaces, so it's mostly out of sight. And it helps solve a huge national problem: getting rid of trash that isn't even supposed to be here. A lot of the trash in Indonesia comes from places like Europe, Australia, and the United States, which started shipping its waste here in the early 2000s. Indonesia's lax environmental regulations and low labor costs made doing that cheaper. Western nations started exporting even more here in 2018, after China banned plastic waste imports, turning the country into one of the world's top dumping grounds. A lot of this plastic is single-use and cannot be recycled even in countries with developed infrastructure.
I think this one, Uni Eropa. This is from Italy.
Even the kinds that are recyclable often don't get processed here.
Indonesia already have problems with our own domestic waste. We have lack of capacity. They keep adding more burden to us. It's really irresponsible.
In 2019, the situation got so bad, Indonesia rejected 58 container ships carrying trash from the United States. But reportedly, only 12 made it back. Many of the rest were dumped in other developing countries. To stem the flow, Indonesia banned all plastic trash imports as of 2025. But they keep coming anyway. Sometimes, importers bribe customs officers to get plastic in more easily, according to one report. Countries are still allowed to export other types of trash, like paper, here. But for every 3 million tons of waste labeled as paper, about 450,000 tons are actually plastic, according to Ecoton's reporting. In May 2025, months after the ban took effect, the US illegally shipped about 5 million pounds of plastic in a single month. And these factories have become a way to get rid of it. This facility gets tofu pre-made and fries it up over stoves fueled by plastic too.
People already aware, that this job have high risk. They need to make living, and they see this plastic fuel is very effective, so people think it's good for them, but actually they become a victim.
50-year-old Suaria has worked at this factory nearly every day for almost half of her life. She says plastic makes the flames burn stronger.
Ya panas, sumuk.
She cooks 5 batches a day to earn her $3 wage.
Nggak ada, sudah meninggal. Dilakoni lah mbak, gak mampu ngoten lho. Jadi ya sehari-harinya ya begini.
Snack wrappers are among the most dangerous kinds of plastic to burn because they contain dyes that can make fumes extra poisonous.
Di kampung iku, sing botol-botol niku, kadang kan bensin mboten kanggo ngoten niku sih. Niku wedi. Mungkin nek dilebokaken kadang enten uline, kadang enten ngopone langsung meledak. Nah, kula kan iki nate kedosan.
Here in Troporo village, these factories aren't just unsafe for workers. They are also polluting the air, with toxic emissions about 20 times the national limit. In 2019, researchers found that free-range chicken eggs from around here contained dioxin levels 70 times higher than the safe limit. That chemical is extremely poisonous. It can damage the liver even in tiny amounts and can cause serious birth defects and cancer. The only place with more toxic eggs in Asia was Vietnam. where the US dropped the now banned chemical weapon Agent Orange during the war. But instead of cracking down, the Indonesian government appointed a panel of experts to dispute the findings. Meanwhile, those chemicals are also seeping into the water supply.
And this is the wastewater from the process. It will just discharge without any filtration or any treatment to the nearby waterways.
While the Indonesian government has outright banned plastic imports, activists say they haven't seen much change.
Do you believe that those developed countries care about the well-being here?
No, they are so mean, they are so cruel, they are irresponsible.
Beli tahu untuk persiapan makan malam sama anak-anak 5.000.
But some locals, for whom this tofu is a staple, refuse to believe the worst. Like Titin, who has been buying from factories like this one since she was a child.
Enggak, hampir setiap hari.
Titin mostly buys the wet kind. Historically, tofu has been especially popular among low-income groups.
Enggak ada. Meriah. Sedang makan tahu sama bakso, anak-anak juga suka. Yuk makan.
In fact, Indonesians eat more of it than they do beef or chicken. And for generations, it was good for you. Traditionally, factories cooked tofu over discarded rice husks, wood, and other biodegradables. They were free and generally safer to burn. But as plastic piled up, it slowly took over as the main fuel source. And what was once a nutritious meal quietly became a toxic one. The danger isn't apparent right away.
Buktinya ibu, bapak dari kecil sampai makan tahu juga, enggak apa-apa, juga sehat sampai sekarang. Sehat semua.
But over the years, dozens of reports have warned against this tofu, including a documentary that went viral in early 2025.
There is plastic fumigated tofu that is quietly feeding and poisoning entire cities.
But surprisingly, factory owners and workers told us sales shot up the first month after the video was published.
Kan penasaran, semakin rame, iya malah beli semua, penasaran membuktikan.
Today, food stands, markets, and restaurants all get their tofu from factories like Gufron's. Some recipes have become beloved local specialties, like the popular street food called tahu tek, which got its name from the sounds vendors make as they go around selling it on the streets. Even knowing how it's prepared doesn't stop locals like Sri Surya from enjoying this meal.
The taste is quite special for me. We eat tofu from the very beginning of our life. It's actually easy to find and it's also affordable.
And she believes the actions of the West are simply an oversight.
It is possibly that they only do not know that how the trash is used in developing countries. That's why they're still continuing this. But once they know, I'm sure that they will end.
As industrialized countries continue to make more and more waste, the problem of where to put it all is only growing. The United Nations says more than $1 trillion worth of plastic was produced in 2023, and 75% will become waste, polluting oceans and ecosystems. Even places like the Atacama Desert, where foreign cars, tires, and a mountain of clothes gather dust. One of the driest places on Earth, the Atacama preserves the world's castoffs indefinitely, a monument to consumption and the world's broken waste management system.